Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much also for inviting me. Even if I understood not so much during the first part of this day, I think we had some interesting talks in the breaks, and I'm still happy to be here, not only to show you what our future ideas are, how biobanks could potentially develop in the future, but also to be available for those who are more interested in Bbmri Eric as such. I was asked to show a few slides, or at least say a little bit about Bbmri Eric. But Bbmri Eric was founded by the member states trying to make use of the existing national networks. You have had a presentation from Christian showing what Bbmri Norway is doing, and more recently Joachim showing what Bbmri Sweden is doing. And to coordinate all those national networks, the countries have come together, say, well, we need an international body, a kind of a secretariat, which is Bbmri Eric, trying to coordinate what's going on in the different countries, and try to let those countries develop things not too independently into very different directions. So this is very, very quickly about what Bbmri Eric is doing. But today I really would like to present you much more what is beyond today's Bbmri, because there are some opportunities which some countries are currently taking. I want to put some courtesy to Kurt Zadlukal because that originally is his idea, and I got also quite some slides from him on that. And it is about a new program. It's a program which got the name Juncker Initiative. Juncker is the president of the European Commission, and it's an investment plan for Europe. You might have heard about that in the media. Taking a few billions out of the EU budget, tripling it up to loans and risk takers. A 300 billion plan was set up, and a special task force was set up to evaluate projects which member state had to send in to Brussels. And interestingly, only 3 projects with a research infrastructure background were actually positively evaluated, just on the basis of potential for this program, and Bbmri was one of those projects. I will not go into the financial modeling. Important to know is that this is for any kind of technology field. It is not about research as such, but research and innovation can take part in this funding models. And it runs through the very typical innovation schemes you very likely will also have in your country, namely through pre-seed phases with business angels, microcredits, early stage funding, mezzanine funding, and portfolio guarantees, etc. So these are the typical innovation tools which nowadays almost every country has to set up their own innovation programs. Now, what is the proposal? And the rationale I try to put together in those 4 sentences really is the challenges we are facing with the aging societies in our countries. And those health challenges can only be addressed by a significant advancement of medicine and an improved disease prevention. And this advancement of medicine actually will really rely on an efficient access to and usage of medical and scientific data. And this is what many researchers are referring to as big data. This is exactly what I'm saying here. And what we really need is an infrastructure that can, on a quality controlled and a secure environment level, can advocate this proper management of massive health and research data. Now, the project here suggests, but that's not the only way, but here suggests to build on the infrastructure which already exists in most of the countries, namely Bbmri Eric. As it was an Austrian proposal to the Commission, it is the Austrian network of Bbmri, which was the starter of that idea. And the idea is to upgrade Bbmri Eric, upgrade in what sense? Namely to establish a new infrastructure for medical research data, providing data curation, data quality criteria, privacy and data security, professional storage, and efficient access. And I will show you a little bit how this is supposed to work. This is the overall picture. I think the important part here really is that you have on the left side all the patients, the individuals who are interested to join such an endeavor, but also the whole healthcare systems. We have some countries signing up saying, yes, we are interested to store all our health data generated in hospitals in such a framework. You have on the right side Bbmri Eric as the current infrastructure, providing access to research and innovation through a system which has to be created, and I'll go into the details how this intermediate package could look like, which starts at a very safe and secure storage system, thereby guaranteeing the necessary sustainability with all the needs down to the data curation, so that there is a real data knowledge which then can be accessed and analyzed. This needs a very different system than so far any country has, and as it was proposed as an Austrian project to be the pilot, there are quite some Austrian companies involved. What you see here is the Earth Data project from an IT company in Austria named Kapsch. This is a 350-meter deep former mining tunnel where a myriad of servers are currently set up, so with all the necessary backup systems, electricity backup systems, etc., which could be used as the storage facility. And just as a teaser, this is a British company called Maxilla, which is very much involved with the British government and the British National Bank to develop new strategies for cybersecurity, because obviously security is one of those issues here. So what type of data are we thinking of? There are public non-for-profit or non-economic data, which are the classical medical data for research, lifestyle data. You're doing that already. But also data from mobile devices, and that's why you have seen that also individual patients should be involved in and will be involved in such a project. Disease histories, all the clinical data which are generated in hospitals. So EHR, laboratory parameters, pathological diagnosis, and so on, imaging data, but also molecular data, as many of my previous speakers have referred to. And then there should be also data for profit services. And here we have already started a dialogue with some hospitals and with the European Society for Radiology, because there is a huge need to store and bring access to imaging data, high-value data for companies and governments, and obviously also for some, it should be open for private people who want to store their medical data, their documents, images, etc., in such an environment. Why is imaging so important here? It's not only the showcase for other data sets. There is an enormous increase in the imaging field in terms of the stored data. There are new data generation, 3Ds, movies, digital pathology is developing. In many countries, and very likely also in Norway, there is a legal obligation to store treatment data. And if you, for example, undergo an MRI, if you undergo endoscopy, in principle, those data need to be stored for at least 30 years. And no one is doing that because that just doesn't exist for the moment. So there is a real demand, both in the public as well as in the private area, healthcare area, to have an infrastructure capable of storing those data and bring them to access later on. That obviously will allow a lot of companies then, those who are producing those machines, producing those big data, like Siemens, Philips, different sequencers, etc., also to have a base and make use then of such data. This slide just shows you the latest numbers I found of MRI, CT scans, and mammographies done in certain countries. And numbers are growing by year. And it's not a few hundreds, it's thousands of such cases. Eurostat is counting high-tech medical equipment. And this table, just for a few EU countries, shows you that there are several thousands of those machines available in our countries, and they are used, as you have seen in the previous one. This slide is for CT scanners. The next one is for MRI units. So there is a huge base for imaging, and that's why we want to focus at the first on imaging data. What's the competitive advantage of something like that? First of all, it is really to provide a professional solution, getting companies involved in security, in sustainability, in all the access procedures will not only be a technical professional solution, and the second part is also an ELSI compliant solution, because from the beginning on, the Common Service ELSI, as you have heard, a specific service provider for scientists to ensure compliance in such projects, will bring the necessary professional solution here. We have discussed, or some of you have discussed, the question of uncertainty in the legal framework. Here, the key advantage is very clear. It is a very defined location in that very specific case, a kind of a bunker in the Alps in Austria with a very clear legal framework. It's not a cloud. The data are not somewhere going from one country to another with legal frameworks which you don't know about. There is a very strong physical and cybersecurity component on that, which you need if you handle something like that. You generate a lot of added value by data analysis or providing also the necessary tools for data analysis and knowledge generation tools there. And obviously, if you think of splitting the costs for such an infrastructure in having fees for data storage, data access, and analysis, you can dramatically downscale those costs and be quite cost efficient. So it is a win-win situation. It is one of these very typical and very often cited public-private partnerships which need to be set up, because you provide access to knowledge, to users, to stakeholders, and policymakers. And the unique business development here is that whoever wants to have access to those data, for example, pharma, for example, biotech, for example, IT companies developing new applications, they can test, they can validate their products in a very safe environment. This is shown how the current thinking of the business model goes. So there is a non-for-profit part. This is Bbmri Eric with the infrastructure as such, but industry can make use of such data and develop their own business cases based on such a data structure. The key activities here are very clear, namely first, define the user needs with key stakeholders, and these are in our case patients, research and development, and healthcare systems, so it's the hospitals we are thinking of. It has to be ethically and legally compliant, which means you need all the approval by ethics committees, by data protection authorities, etc. If you do that in one country, you avoid to go and need to ask for several of those approvals. You have to develop new tools for patient empowerment, and many IT companies are already doing that. Through secure identify, mobile devices, patient, and also the patient's active role as a partner. I think this is a very interesting part. We have spoken to a few patient organizations, and they're extremely interested in joining such a project. You need new tools for data curation, because we are really going into an area where no one before of that scale has ever come in medical data, for the collection, integration, cleanup, annotation, structuring, provenance of those data. Data storage as such is not a big problem, but the point here is to find secure and sustainable storage, and again, this is one of the advantages in that proposal. And then you need to provide appropriate data access. So you need to develop new user interface, query tools, platforms for open knowledge sharing, and so on. Now this is continued then by data analysis, because you want that these data are used. You want to bring users to your databases, and that all the necessary data analysis tools are available on those servers, so that data do not need to be transferred wherever you want them to have, so that they are actually analyzed in that secure space, in that legal framework, and no data can actually be retrieved. You can just retrieve then the results out of those data, which means there is a lot to be done in big data analysis, in visual analytics, in computational modeling, and obviously we want to go much beyond a national or even a European level, because this can really be an international project if you do it well. And here are just some of those partners mentioned where contacts has already been done. The impact of such a project on two levels, on innovation and society, because whenever we are asked by politicians or policymakers is what is the impact. Interestingly, politicians do not ask astronomers what is the impact of their research for innovation or society, but life scientists are always asked for those two questions, and we have some answers here. It is obviously in the innovation part that such an efficient market entry strategy will bring new solutions for digital health. It's new products, patient IDs, new mobile devices, new data management solutions, high performance computing and data security, and so on. We obviously hope that this is then to be used for new diagnostics, because giving access to such an enormous amount of data should make these products available, and also for healthcare management. If you think that for a second that those several thousands of hospitals which exist in Europe, they all have their own solutions to store their current data, or they may just discard some of the data. What an improvement that might have just to see and have some of those managed data sets available. For society, it's a rather broad impact what we can see, but it is clear that the economy will improve, that the health systems will improve. It will help to increase health literacy, which is a very important aspect in some countries, maybe not so much in the Nordic countries, but also improved security, I think, especially in terms of data protection, is an issue. We have done a first SWOT analysis, and I will not go into the details here, but there is documentation on the threats and the weaknesses, but also to understand what the strengths are and what the opportunities are. It is also published in a report which whoever is interested in, I can provide access to. You need a new governance model. I mean, something like that needs a very thoughtful governance structure, especially because we talk about a public-private partnership. You have industry involved who have very clear economical outlooks. So you need to think about how such a governance structure should look like. The suggestion for the moment is that there will be a close relationship to Bbmri Eric. If not, Bbmri Eric as such is the body who is the lead in such a project. But obviously, you will need to have an assembly of all the members. You will need executive management and international ethics monitoring board, a nominated data protection officer, and so on. Who are the current possible partners? Most of them, as I said, this was an Austrian-based suggestion to that Juncker package. These are the Austrian universities currently partnering up in the Austrian Bbmri network. In the industry, we have already some interesting contacts also outside from Austria. As I said, this British company, Maxella, is very much into it. We have talked to pharma and biotech industry, and they are very much in lining up for such a project. Patient organization, and we do that directly at the European level. We do not do that at the national level. Bbmri Eric, as I said, might be even the coordinator or has a coordinating function in such a project, and you will also need public engagement and dissemination bodies, and there is also one body already identified in Brussels with whom we work together for quite some time. So I stop here, say thank you very much for listening to me. I want to stress that this is future-looking. This is not, what already exists. There are enormous hurdles still to be overdone, but this is a way where we can really make a big step forward. And if you have questions, I'm here for today. And if you have very specific questions, as I said, Kurt Zatlukal is the father of the idea. You can obviously contact also him. Thank you very much.
Tack for clarifying these huge challenges with the big data. Any questions from the audience? Everything is still clear? Joachim, you need to use that one.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Very interesting, and I'm glad to see that the concept is moving, and it's moving fast. Now, the original name of this concept, when Kurt Zatlukal first started speaking about it, was the Biological Expert Center. And it's also been, when we have been doing some of the stakeholder dialogue with the industry, they very frequently state that, well, we do need the data and the samples, but we want the clinical expertise also to make a deal. And to summarize the question, in your presentation, where are the experts?
Yeah. The experts, the clinical experts, comes in through the contract with the hospitals. Because even today, Karolinska hospitals or any hospital here in Norway have agreements with either in-house or extramural data storage providers. And any project making use of that needs the associated clinicians, either directly or indirectly. So there is no change in that respect. I think that the real change is that we are not talking about one hospital anymore, but many, maybe even all of one country, and that you can grant easy access to those data. Again, you will need the necessary clinicians in the analysis phase, because you will need to clarify. Obviously, also in the data cleaning process, you will need them, etc. But this is no change to the current situation. It's the magnitude which really changes.
One more question. Yes, you do.
Internet users.
Okay. This is Eero Vuorio. I'm from the board as well. Markus, maybe I missed it, but one intergovernmental organization which has been heavily working on curation of data and storage of data is, of course, European Bioinformatics Institute, EMBL, and then Elixir, as we know it. Has this project been kind of developing together with their activities, and or could you maybe elaborate a bit more?
This is a very important question. Thank you, Eero. Where EBI and Elixir are masters of the universe is molecular data. Where they have so far no expertise whatsoever is clinical data. And I think we need an EBI or an Elixir for clinical data. And we think that Bbmri could develop into something for clinical data. I mean, it's absolutely clear if you touch any molecular data, all these tools are either already in existence or they're well treated and well developed under EBI and Elixir leadership. But there is almost nothing in the field of clinical data. If you think of imaging, as I said, we have started a discussion with the European Society for Radiologists, and Elixir is not playing in that field at all. This is an empty space, if you so wish, and we suggest Bbmri is going into that direction.